Since the dawn of creation, there lies a hidden empire nestled in the highlands of the African Rift Valley, from whence all life sprang forth, and the first civilizations known to mankind were born in her. She is the original cradle of humanity, the Garden of Eden. She is Ethiopia. It was here that scientists in 1974 discovered the remains of a woman 3.2 million years old and just over 3 feet high in length. Known to the world as Lucy, she is known in Ethiopia as Dinkinish, which means "you are amazing." In the caves of these mountain highlands, rock paintings can be found that date back 12,000 years and show the existence of settled agriculture, which has become the trademark of this ancient land. Grains such as sorghum and millet originated in Ethiopia, and grasses such as teff, which is used to make a flat pan bread called injera, only grow in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is also the only place known where the false banana plant is cultivated as a food product, which has made the Ethiopian diet very distinct and unique in the world. Even coffee gets its name from the Ethiopian province of Kaffa, where this drink originated. Ethiopia is also one of the most diverse cultural environments in Africa. There are over 80 ethnic groups in Ethiopia, each having their own language, customs, and lineage, making Ethiopia a rainbow in its spectrum of African culture. Even the landscape is one of unique contrasts. Mountain ranges such as the Simien Mountains reach a height of 4,600 meters above sea level, making Ethiopia one of the highest regions in the world where the climate is very cool and moderate. But on the other hand, places such as the Danakil Depression in the Afar region rest well below sea level and is amongst the hottest and most arid locations in the world. Ethiopia is also the home of one of the 2 branches of the Nile River, the sacred river whose silt traveled down the Egyptian valley to birth an African civilization whose science and culture we are still trying to understand. Indeed, this land has been the seat of several ancient empires that were amongst the oldest and most well-known in the ancient world. History will recall the kingdoms of Meroe, Punt, Nubia, and Kush that stretched all the way to the Ganges River in India, which all existed in this region known as Ethiopia. Ancient Hindu manuscripts called Ethiopians the old race, and the Greeks called them the blameless Ethiopians. But Ethiopia has its own ancient text to boast to the world, as it is one of the few locations in Africa that developed its own script. Here along the Red Sea coast, a script called Sabaean was used all throughout Ethiopia and southern Arabia to scribe Ge'ez, the ancient ecclesiastical language of Ethiopia. Ge'ez is very closely related to Hebrew and Arabic and is the root of several languages found in Ethiopia, including Amharic, the national language. Ge'ez was first written with the Sabaean script, but with the coming of Christianity in Ethiopia in the 4th century AD, a new consonantal script called the Fidel was used to translate the Bible into Ge'ez. Indeed, Ethiopia is very closely connected with Christianity and is in fact mentioned over 52 times in the Bible, more than any other nation. Ethiopia was the home of the Queen of Sheba, the wise queen of the south, who visited King Solomon in ancient Israel to learn of his wisdom. From their union, a son was born that would begin a dynasty that will continue for 3,000 years up to Haile Selassie I. His name was Menelik, and from his visit to King Solomon, the Ark of the Covenant was brought to Ethiopia, where it is believed to rest today. Christianity reached Ethiopia during the time of the apostles and has been practiced here ever since then. But when a Syrian monk known as Abuna Salama reached Ethiopia in the 4th century AD and inspired King Izana to convert to Christianity, he made it the official state religion, making Ethiopia the first and oldest Christian empire in the world. This occurred at Aksum, another ancient African empire located in the Ethiopian highlands. Beginning in the 3rd century BC, Aksum developed into a very advanced state, building dams, water reservoirs, and even minting their own coins. In fact, Aksum was the first nation in the world to use Christian symbols such as the cross on its state currency. Aksum's power declined in the 9th century AD, but it continued to be the spiritual capital of the Ethiopian Empire for a long time to come, and many of the succeeding emperors traveled to Aksum for the coronation. The decline of Aksum was followed by a shift of power to the south in the early 12th century. Here in the mountains of Lasta, The Ago kings took power from the Aksumite rulers and began a new dynasty of leadership that would last for the next 150 years. This was known as the Zagwe dynasty. The Zagwe kings left few records of their reign, but they left a deep impact on the empire. They took a keen interest in perpetuating the Christianity they learned from the Aksumite kings and became known as great church builders. This included King Lalibela, the best known of the Zagwe rulers. As tradition holds, Lalibela was visited by God and told to build a new Jerusalem in Ethiopia, which he obeyed by building 11 rock-hewn churches, which are all carved out of solid rock and connected by tunnels. The Zagwe dynasty came to a close not long after Lalibela's reign, when the king of Shoa, Yakuna Amlak, overthrew Lalibela's son and established himself on the throne further south in Shoa. As a descendant of King Solomon and Queen of Sheba, Yakuna Amlak restored the Solomonic lineage upon the throne. Shortly after this, the Kebra Nagast, or the Glory of the Kings, was published. This book became a very important national epic as it explained in detail the story of the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon and how the Solomonic dynasty began. As such, the Kebra Nagast helped to solidify the position of the Solomonic kings as the rightful and original leaders of the Ethiopian Empire. During the first centuries of the Solomonic dynasty, Ethiopia was surrounded by several Muslim empires, and her rulers welcomed the alliances that could be made with the European Christian states to protect her sovereignty. At the same time, the European world was engulfed in the Crusades and had virtually no Christian alliance outside of Europe. As a result of these changes, Ethiopia soon found herself surrounded by two armies, one Christian and one Muslim, and both were well armed. This threatened the isolation and sovereignty that Ethiopia had enjoyed for so long. Following a devastating invasion by the Muslim armies along the coast in the early 1500s, the Ethiopian emperors continued to try to acquire firearms and military support, mainly from the Portuguese, as a means of protecting their country from further attacks. In the process, they began to lean towards the Catholic faith that the Portuguese were introducing into the country. Eventually, in 1622, the Emperor Susenyos began dressing in Portuguese attire and even outlawed many of the Orthodox customs in favor of adopting the Catholic faith. The people rebelled en masse, and the emperor responded with brutal force. This caused the entire empire to disintegrate as the emperor's forced religious conversion completely divided the people. Finally, the emperor's son, Fasilides, pleaded with him to stop the bloodshed, saying, "The dead are neither Muslims or pagans, but are your own subjects and countrymen, some of them even being relatives." Fasilides then convened the religious leaders together to consider the state of the faith in Ethiopia. The council unanimously decided to restore the Orthodox faith in the empire, which Susenyos agreed to in 1632. This act alone almost single-handedly united the Ethiopian empire around her ancient faith, with her king being the sacred symbol of the empire. Susenyos died only 3 months later, and when his son Fasilides succeeded him, he dropped all attempts to gain the favor of the West, and even went as far as to make agreements with the Muslims controlling the coastal area to prevent any European from entering the region from the coast. As the new emperor, Fasilides established his capital north of Lake Tana at a place called Gondar. Following the tradition recently started by the preceding emperors, the king built a very big and luxurious castle at Gondar, which captured the adoration of the people and has since then become a major tourist attraction in Ethiopia. The castle of Fasilides set a precedent that all of the Gondarian emperors would follow by building elaborate castles to symbolize their authority. Beginning in the early 19th century, the divided empire began to feel the effects of the Industrial Revolution that was then in full swing in Western Europe. This forced Ethiopia to put aside its internal power struggles and to consolidate the various regions into one centralized government in order to protect itself from its neighbors. This occurred primarily with the next 3 emperors, Tewodros, Johannes, and Menelik II. Although their personalities and methods of development were very different, they all shared the common desire to unify Ethiopia, protect its borders, and bring modernization and new technology into Ethiopia. The rise of Kassa Hailu marked the beginning of this movement to modernize the Ethiopian state. He took the name Tewodros upon his coronation as emperor in response to a popular prophecy that predicted a king named Tewodros would rise up, rule justly, recapture Jerusalem for the Christians, and bring peace to Ethiopia for 1,000 years. Tewodros embarked upon an ambitious plan to bring his people out of the Middle Ages. He even established a workshop in the Gondar area where he employed foreigners to make firearms for his army. But in the end, it was his infatuation to modernize the country that caused his heroic downfall. Tewodros sent a letter to Queen Victoria of England asking for artisans and gunsmiths. However, when the British Council returned to Ethiopia without a reply, Tewodros seized the council and declared that they would not be freed until he received an answer to his letter. In 1864, after negotiations between the two nations failed, an expeditionary force was sent into Ethiopia to free the hostages. The emperor in the meantime had taken his captives to his mountain fortress in Magdala and awaited the British forces. He had his huge cannon dragged up the mountain to his fortress, but in the ensuing battle, the emperor's men were crushed. Upon seeing that all was lost, Tewodros picked up the pistol sent to him years earlier by Queen Victoria and shot himself rather than face the humiliation of captivity. Tewodros' followers wailed and wept for the Lion of Magdala, as he was called, and the dirge singers praised him for choosing a proud death over captivity. He became the symbol of national pride by his act of suicide, and he left a big mark on his country, paving the way for the modernization of Ethiopia. As the regional races began to compete with each other for control of the empire after Tewodros' death, Ras Kasa Mircha proved victorious. Claiming the throne for himself, he took upon the name Yohannes as he defeated the encroaching Egyptian armies in 1875, erasing their ambitions to expand into Ethiopia forever. The British took control of Egypt in 1882 and claimed control over all of the territories previously occupied by the Mahdis, which were the Muslim Egyptian soldiers. The British promised to return the land taken by the Mahdis, as well as the port of Massawa, to Ethiopia. However, they secretly passed control of the port to the Italians, and when they raised their flags above the port of Massawa in 1884, the emperor was enraged. This began the long and bloody conflict between Ethiopia and Italy. But before they could settle this matter, the Mahdis attacked Ethiopia from the west, and in the battle, the emperor was killed, being the last monarch to fall on the battlefield in the world. As the scramble for control of the Ethiopian crown resumed again, Menelik II, king of Showa, used his contacts with Italy to secure his position as emperor. He accepted their claims on the newly occupied lands along the coast in exchange for their recognition of him as the emperor of Ethiopia. In doing this, slowly but surely, all of the regional races or chiefs began to flock to Showa to pay their homage to the new kings of Ethiopia. The year was 1889, and just as Menelik I brought a new dynasty to Ethiopia that changed the empire forever, Menelik II would initiate the movement to modernize Ethiopia and change her age-old history forever.